Even by Fox's standards, Sunday's broadcast was exceptionally bad. Katherine Legge will be making her first NASCAR Cup Series start, and maybe we need track limits in turn 6. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Fox has been broadcasting NASCAR races for 25 years. But if you tuned into Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race from Circuit of the Americas, you would have thought it was their first time, and they hired some kids from the local community college to staff it because it was exceptionally bad, even by Fox's standards. The most egregious clip, the most egregious moment came to us in the closing laps of the race with 6 laps to go as Christopher Bell and Kyle Busch are battling for the lead. Fox is in a double box looking at the wives of Kyle Busch and Christopher Bell, and then they cut. The director decides to cut from that to a shot of those two side by side, and instead of seeing the cars, we saw the back of the grandstand, which by grandstand standards looks like a nice one. I'd sit there, it seems like a pretty good time, but that's not what I tuned in to watch, or anybody else, unless you're a grandstand enthusiast, which I'm sure there are some out there. People love guardrails. There's definitely people that love grandstands. They cut to that, we miss it. We just straight up miss it. And in the clip, you can hear Clint Bowyer just let out this just exasperated sigh of disappointment that they once again missed it. And then there's just 15 seconds of dead air after that, and it sounds like a mic is turned back on. So I have a feeling there was some conversation between the on-air talent and the production trailer, and it probably wasn't very good. Ultimately, they cut back from that shot of the back of the grandstand to a really bad onboard shot of Kyle Busch, and you just really couldn't see anything. Super disheartening. I've seen some people mention on Twitter that they think that the reason we had 15 seconds of dead air is so that they could play the team's audio transmission. Maybe, possibly, but Bowyer was in the middle of talking when he just stopped and let out that sigh. And we heard Clint Bowyer be disappointed before, if you remember back to North Wilkesboro 2023 in the All-Star race, when he wanted the production trailer to stay with them so he could watch his onboard, and then they cut from it and you can hear him throw his pin.
Off at 2. Stay with me here.
So I get it. I'm just as frustrated as Clint is, and I know everybody else is as well, because it shouldn't be this hard. It's, like I said, incredibly frustrating that we have to keep dealing with this. And that wasn't even the only moment during the race. There was another really just on-brand Fox sequence that was happening where you have the eventual race leaders battling side by side through the S's, that being Kyle Busch, Shane Van Gisbergen. And Fox is showing that in a double box, and Kyle Larson's tire rolling off the track to the dismay of Ron White. And they decide to cut from that, the battle, not the tire. They decide to cut from the battle to show us Ryan Preece, who technically was the race leader at that time, going through the short chute from 6A to 6B all by himself. Then they cut back to look at the short chute once again. We see Justin Haley come through. Then we see the two eventual leaders after the stage ends come into the shot, that being SUG and Kyle Busch. There's contact there and just no mention ever from the booth. And it seems like there's this very clear disconnect between what the on-air talent is watching and what the production trailer is showing. And at some point, they have to gel. And I know Artie Kempner will go on whatever podcast will have him, and he'll talk about how great Fox is, how their production is this and that. And listen, they've won a bunch of Emmys. Don't get me wrong. But it's all for stuff that they've done in the past. Their recent production over the last 5 years even has just been really, really bad. And the new standard is basement level. The standard is a standard. Well, the standard's so low that anything they do seemingly positive is viewed in this great, acclaim. And it's like, but they're just doing what they should be doing altogether. I know there's people at Fox that absolutely agree with me. People that work on these productions that will probably watch this and be like, hey, yeah, he's definitely right here. But we just continue to see the same mistakes happen over and over. And missing the pass for the lead is just one of those things that you absolutely cannot do. Then you have the scoring pile-on throughout the race. And if you guys are following along on Twitter to Jeff Gluck or anybody, there were multiple track limit violation penalties throughout this race. Alex Bowman got 2, Bo Wallace got 1, Denny Hamlin got a penalty. Multiple people got penalties throughout this race, and I'm not sure the broadcast ever really mentioned any of them. But they can absolutely do that on the scoring pile to note it, just like Formula One does with theirs, and it's just a low effort from Fox that remains incredibly frustrating, especially when you watch the Fox broadcast of IndyCar on Sunday. And don't get me wrong, IMS Productions is doing a ton of the heavy lifting over there, but it's like, go to NASCAR Productions and ask for some help, because at this point, you guys are doing terrible. And don't get me started on the grid walk, because we absolutely don't need Michael Waltrip walking around doing his grid walk. It's incredibly painful to watch. Michael's a nice guy. The grid walk is not fun. He's not Martin Brundle, and nobody really has the personality to really do much on this grid walk here. So you can go ahead and cut that. And then further issues with the Fox side of things, Jamie Little's not a lead play-by-play person. She should not be the voice of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. I'm sorry. She's a great pit reporter. We saw her excel in that. She's not good in that role. Hire Eric Brennan from the car store, hire somebody else, but she's just not cut out for being the lead voice of the truck series. And it's all just things like this. Listen, I understand people have contracts. You're going to use them because they're under contract. But at some point, you just have to think that the production value's got to get better, right? Maybe, possibly. It's not, which is unfortunate because I think we're all sitting around being like, just get a little bit better. And we're not getting it. So it'll probably continue on. I mean, heck, 2023, Clint Boyer got so frustrated during the All-Star race when he told the production truck to stay with the shot of the onboard coming off the corner, and they cut from it, and you can hear him throw his pin, which, hey, I would have done the exact same thing because I'm just as frustrated. We've heard Kyle Busch yell at the production trailer before as well when he was doing Xfinity broadcast before he was full-time in the booth. And it's things like that where it's just be better. Just be a little bit better. And it's unfortunate that we're not getting a broadcast that is up to the standard of what NASCAR fans should be getting. Because at the end of the day, I just want a better broadcast for the betterment of the sport is really what it comes down to. NASCAR fans and NASCAR deserve better than what they're getting right now from Fox. And listen, I'll give Fox props when they deserve them. I thought the Daytona 500, when I got back from the track, I rewatched the broadcast. I thought they did a really good job. And I even mentioned that on social. I'm probably pretty sure I mentioned it in a video as well, that when they do a good job, I'm going to say that they did a good job. Mainly because the bar's been set so low that if you just do the bare minimum and exceed it by a little bit, I'm like, hey, this is great. But it was good. 3 weeks later at Circuit of the Americas, really bad. Really, really bad. And now, hey, we're headed to Phoenix next week. There's only 4 corners there, so hopefully we're able to get a camera in every single one. We'll be able to watch it. There is a gigantic grandstand there, so don't count out of the question that we may get a shot of the backside of it while there's a race happening for the lead, but I just hope that Sunday's broadcast is better than what we've seen, or saw rather, this past weekend at Circuit of the Americas. Before we get into Katherine Legge, today's video is sponsored by Driven Sunglasses. Just like 2024, back with me in 2025. I wear the Camber sunglasses literally on a daily basis. It's the sunglass I wore every single day I was in Daytona, so if you saw me, that's what I was wearing there. I wear the Camber and the Classic every day. I've got like 4 or 5 pairs of them scattered around the house. Grab them when I'm about to walk the dog, I'm going to the store, anything like that. Head over to drivensunglasses.com today. Use code BRAKEHARD at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Katherine Legge will be making her NASCAR Cup Series debut on Sunday in Phoenix, driving for Live Fast Motorsports in that number 78 car that's typically driven by BJ McLeod. She'll be the first woman to race in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2018 when Danica Patrick, Sky Sports commentator, as she's famously known for now, made her start in the Daytona 500. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people that are like, what qualifies Katherine Legge to race in the Cup Series? But Mike Wallace can't. So let's go through her recent racing resume real quick. Katherine Legge ran the ARCA Daytona race earlier this year. Okay, check recent stock car experience. She's made 5 NASCAR Xfinity Series starts. That's great. She's raced in the last 2 Indianapolis 500s, 4 overall in her career. She is a multi-time full season participant in the IMSA Series, made select starts in 2024. Her recent racing resume over the last decade is far superior to that of Mike Wallace, who just doesn't have much recent racing activity in the last 5 years, and certainly not in the NASCAR Cup Series or in anything, honestly, that would have been comparable to the Daytona 500. Now, would they have approved Katherine Legge to run the Daytona 500? I think that would be unlikely. Phoenix is a different story. It is a short track. The chances of her causing a massive incident are far lower in Phoenix than they are in the Daytona 500. And don't get me wrong, Katherine Legge, I think she knows going into this race, she's not competing for a win, a top 10, a top 20. She's just really trying to run all of the laps. And Katherine Legge is a really talented race car driver. I know there's a lot of incels that are going to be like, she doesn't deserve to be out there. She's far better at driving a car than you will ever be, even if you practice every single day. Now, should Mike Wallace be allowed to race the Daytona 500? Still, no. Contrary to what the Couch Racer account seems to think on Twitter. I don't know if Brett was tweeting or if it was somebody else, but Mike Wallace would not lap Katherine Legge in a backup car. Mike Wallace is a 65-year-old man at this point who is qualified for Medicaid and Medicare at this point. He's getting Social Security checks. He's, got that AARP card for the last decade. We have to stop acting like Mike Wallace is this all-time talent that is being restricted from the Cup Series, that he's been banned somehow. No, Mike Wallace just hasn't been in a race recently, and Mike Wallace is old. I'm sorry, it just is at this point. Katherine Legge is not 65 years old either. So, yeah, the comparisons between the two are really annoying, but Katherine Legge making her first NASCAR Cup Series start this weekend in Phoenix. Last but not least, on the day, I think we need track limits through the S's at Circuit of the Americas. So if you watch the broadcast on Sunday, teams found out at the end of stage 1 that NASCAR just wasn't calling track limits in turn 6, and boy, did they take advantage of it. Track limits in turns 3, 4, and 5. We live in a society in those corners. You shut the door after you leave the house. You put the toilet paper roll with the toilet paper coming over. You put the seat lid down. We get it. We live in a society there. Turn 6, anarchy. Do whatever you want. Leave the toilet seat lid up. Set the toilet paper on the counter. Doesn't matter. Leave your doors wide open. Don't recommend that. But I'm just saying you could, because anarchy. Do whatever you want here. There's no rules in society. And boy, did the drivers take advantage of it. Because on the last lap of the race, the perfect example of it right here is Christopher Bell, who's going through that corner, and it appears he's at least a car and a half, maybe 2 car lengths to the inside of the red and white curb. And it's at what point is this too much? What's the point of having a racing surface if we're not racing on the racing surface? I'll be really interested to hear what the NASCAR Hauler Talk podcast has to say about it this week, because I think when they go back to look at it, they're going to be like, maybe we should have called it here because this is a bit egregious. Because now, what happens when we go back next year? If you're not calling it there, well, what's to stop drivers from going, 16 feet further to the right, as Christopher Bell was going through there, and just really making that kind of a straight shot all the way across? Now, I'm not in favor of that. I think that looks ridiculous, and it makes you look amateurish when other series and other fans are watching this going like, well, there's the racetrack. Why aren't they on the racetrack? It makes no sense. It's like having out of bounds in football and being like, well, we're only going to call out of bounds on the left side of the field. If you go on the right side of the field between like the 30 and the 50 and you run out, we're fine with that. What? Okay, catch a touchdown outside the end zone. Well, he's in the vicinity of the end zone, so we're just going to go ahead and give it to him. No, there's rules for a reason. And as much as we all hate track limits, you have to have it there in some fashion, because if not, these guys are just going to do a straight shot all the way through the S. It's going to look ridiculous. So I would be in favor of it. I know I hate rules just as much as everybody else, but if you're going to run these S's, there either has to be gravel to the inside right there where drivers aren't going to be able to cut at, or you have to have track limits. We're not putting walls up. We're not putting big blocks up. I know people are going to mention that. That's a safety hazard for sure. As Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi talked about on their podcast, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was completely right when he said that if you hit one of those blocks that the track had initially put there to deter drivers from cutting the corner, it's going to rip the wheel out of your hands and break your wrists more than likely. And we don't need that, because there's a easier solution, a better solution than that. So yeah, I think we need track limits through turn 6, because it just got a little bit egregious on Sunday. So let me know your comments on what you think about the Fox broadcast Sunday at COTA, Katherine Legge making her first NASCAR Cup start, and do you think we need track limits in turn 6? Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.